to, all right. Are you guys still hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay. Was any of that interrupted, or did you hear all of that?
I heard it all.
Okay, you heard your own introduction?
Oh, no, I didn't hear the introduction.
Okay, very well. I think when I started the recording, it was doing a bit of thinking, so it may have slowed down some of that connection.
Got it.
But if you did not hear the intro, all you other folks, my name is Bobby. I'm moderating this discussion, and our presenter is Julian Sharp from Marist College. And Julian, I have your bio here. Julian is the Director of Digital Education at Marist College, and she holds a bachelor's degree in education, a master's degree in instructional technology, and a doctorate in educational leadership. Her research focuses on how instructors transition from the traditional classroom to the online classroom, and as such is very germane to our discussion. So thank you, Dr. Sharp, for being with us, and we will proceed. Folks, if you guys have questions, I would encourage you to submit them in the chat, and then I will be monitoring the chat, and I will make sure that those questions come to Dr. Sharp's attention. But also, if you have any technical issues or difficulties or questions during the process for me, go ahead and submit them in chat as well, and that'll be kind of our catch-all for questions. All right?
Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining me today. Today, we're going to talk about basically a recipe for success, blending the community of inquiry framework, which is the framework for online teaching and learning, with Sakai, because I think it's important to kind of take a look at both things simultaneously. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the community of inquiry framework, there are three basic ideas that go along with the community of inquiry, and that is that you have to have cognitive presence, social presence, and teaching presence in a learning course to have an actual true learning experience. So when you're in an online course, how do you blend all of those things? And this was a framework that was developed in 2000 by Garrison, Anderson, and Archer. It has since been expanded. There's some discussion amongst researchers about whether it needs to be, 5 circles, or if things need to go in the little in-betweens of the Venn diagram. So it's still obviously, research continues and it changes. But for the most part, people agree that all 3 of these presences need to be there in an online course in order for a positive learning experience to happen. So this is just a little bit more about the community of inquiry framework. The indicators of cognitive presence would be if students have some exploration, they have information exchange, application of new ideas, or the integration of new ideas. So it's the extent to which the participants in any type of configuration are able to construct the meaning. And we see that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework, and then I'll talk a little bit about how Sakai meets those different things from my perspective. So in a social presence, it's the ability of the participants to project their personal characteristics into the community. So indicators are things like expressing emotion or having a group cohesion, some collaboration, teamwork, communication. And in the online environment, that's sometimes hard. Sakai does a really good job at this because it is a very collaborative learning management system, so there are a lot of tools that we can use to increase the social interactions. Teaching presence is kind of self-explanatory, but it's the design of the educational experience and the facilitation of that experience. And so it's things like directing instruction, sharing personal meaning, building some understanding, and focusing discussion. So in an online course, you don't want to have a facilitator or an instructor who just posts all the content and then you don't hear from them again. The instructor has to really be able to guide the instruction. So, how does the community of inquiry relate to Sakai? At Marist, we have a variety of different types of courses. So we have some online courses, we have some blended courses that are 50% online and 50% on ground, and we have some completely on ground courses that all use Sakai. And the community of inquiry, I think, really relates to all of them, not just the online courses, because even in your traditional face-to-face courses, you need to have some of these elements to really be meaningful in the learning environment. So, discussions. That whole cognitive presence thing, the community of inquiry says that you should have clear goals and expectations, you should ask questions, you should have a clear role as the instructor, and you should give various options for reflection. So some of the tools that are native to Sakai and how they can kind of factor in. Forums are a great way to have discussion. That's kind of the typical one. Whoops, I'm sorry. But the comments tool also will allow students to communicate with each other, and then the student pages also is a good way to have the students collaborate and have discussions. We've had some faculty members in the recent semesters use student pages as more of like a blog or a vlog, depending on their content area, which has really helped the students and it's given them that collaborative space for discussion. One of the things that I always stress to faculty when talking about the community of inquiry in Sakai is that you really do have to have that clear instructor role. You have to decide how you're going to shape the conversation. So giving a prompt is great, but how you're able to move that discussion along and how you kind of tailor it to your particular content area is kind of up to you, but you really need to define that role. So I talked about this a little bit. Journals and blogs are a great way to infuse the concepts of the community of inquiry. Journals work really well for reflection, and you don't necessarily have to have a journal tool to be able to do reflection. Course blogs, group blogs, or individual blogs are also a great way, and potentially vlogs. I don't know how many of you have a video type platform in your Sakai. Marist this past year, I think about a year ago, implemented Panopto, which is a screen capture, so that faculty and students can do a vlog within our version of Sakai. But that isn't something that's native to Sakai, that's something that we added in as an LTI tool. But native to Sakai, you do have forums. You can use forums if you put students in groups to do like a blog for your course. The student pages, that's one place where our faculty use blogs a lot for like reflections that are weekly. And the other place that you can do it, but it's not really, it's more individual versus group, is the test and quizzes tool. You can use the test and quizzes tool to have students write a reflection about a particular thing. So peer feedback and group work, this kind of really helps with that social interaction piece. You do need to have clear guidelines. A rubric is always helpful. I know that Sakai right now doesn't have rubrics within it unless you're talking about student pages, but I hear that that's on the horizon, which is a good thing. You need to prepare the students ahead of time for group work in an online environment, because when you're in that online environment, sometimes it's really difficult for them to work in a group. I know that here at Marist, we kind of have two groups of students that take online courses. The first group is the undergrads who, if you put them in a group, they probably are either living on campus or they're living close to campus. So group work is relatively easy, but we also do have a significant number of graduate courses that are online as well. And for those students, they're not necessarily on campus, and they're not necessarily even in the area. So to put students in groups and expect group work, you have to really prepare them, because they might not be in the same time zone, they may not even be in so consider all facets of grading. With Sakai, you have to be cognizant of how the different assignments work and how you're going to grade, and then consider timing. So make sure that the timing of your particular group assignment works with the rest of your course. You don't want to do it, when you also have a big project to do. So some of the tools native to Sakai that really work with peer feedback and group work is the student pages. You can add a rubric to the student pages and have it be peer reviewed. And then as the instructor, you can go in and see both what other students scored one particular student, and you can also see how a particular student scored everybody else. Which is really great, because it gives you the ability to know whether, if you have a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rubric, and you see that one student gave all the other students 3s, that they didn't really take a lot of time to go in and really view all of the other students' work. But you can also see different student comments and how they feel about different parts of that particular assignment. We have one faculty member who uses this for research projects. So in their senior year, our students have to do a research project, and some of our faculty members use the student pages for them to post their ideas and get feedback from their students, and then post more of the research and get feedback. So it really works well. Assignments is another place where you can do some peer review. It is a little bit different than the student pages in that it's more contained. So you could have a lot of students peer reviewing one particular student, but it's not as transparent as the student pages. And in the comments feature, you can always turn those on in a particular lesson and have students comment and work with each other. And then forums is a great way to do group work as well. So we have faculty members who assign a particular assignment to a group, and they give them a forum in which to discuss a particular project. Okay. Synchronous technologies is one thing that is important in the community of inquiry, and it's not something that I found very native to Sakai. There is the chat functionality in Sakai, but there are LTI options as well. So just like we're in a Zoom room right now, Marist uses WebEx. So for this same thing, and I know that a lot of schools also use Big Blue Button, which is very similar as well. We have a lot of faculty in our online courses that offer live support through office hours within WebEx. So they give the students the ability to come to the WebEx and do office hours. Another way that we support synchronous technologies for community building is that there are we don't require students to come to a live session in an online course. However, some faculty members will give them incentive to do so. So they'll get, they won't have to do a second forum one week if they came to the online discussion WebEx. So they kind of use some incentive to get students to come. We also, as I was talking about different ways that on-ground classes use some of these tools and techniques, because we live in an area with a lot of snow, we tend to have some snow days coming up in probably December and January, February timeframe, sometimes even into March and April. So a lot of times the faculty members will do their course that was canceled through a WebEx instead of through, just canceling it because of snow. Collaboration tools, we do have some faculty members who use some of the like Google Docs or Office 365 type things. However, we don't integrate that into our version of Sakai. And same thing with social media. You can use social media as a community building activity. I've seen faculty who use like their Twitter accounts to try to build community within their class. But again, those aren't things that we've integrated within our system. All right, some other technologies that help support the community of inquiry are things like concept maps, screencasting, we talked about that a little bit, visualizations and simulations. So there are a lot of LTI tools out there, and we at Marist, we support a few of them, but not a whole ton of them. And we kind of pick and choose which ones we're going to use. But, oh, I saw something pop up. It's interesting. Okay. We use ones like Panopto for screencasting. We do allow them to, like, you can embed the YouTube videos. So a lot of times we'll have faculty who might want to create a video outside of the classroom who then upload it into YouTube and share it that way. Some simulations, you can use a tool called Branch Track. I'm not sure if anybody's ever used that, but that's a good simulation creation software that embeds similarly to like what a YouTube video would within our Sakai system. So there are definitely a lot of technologies out there that support the community of inquiry, and Sakai does a very good job of being able to incorporate all of those. So what the faculty member needs to do is actually create the online community. So you have all of these great tools, and how do you really facilitate the community? You need to kind of foster that sense of community within your students. And in an online course, the ability of the instructor to establish that presence is closely connected with the ability of the instructor to create that sense of community. So I always suggest to faculty members that they create a video of themselves so that the students can see who their instructor is, even if they don't want to have their face on video every single time they're teaching in an online class, at least to have it there once so that the students can make a connection is always helpful. It helps create that sense of community. I always suggest audio and video as well. Audio helps the students actually hear your voice and be able to make that connection. Reducing the distance. So in an online course, distance education, we know that they actually are all spread out, but distance can lead to isolation. So you want to establish a common sense of responsibility. You want to create a safe, supportive environment and cultivate interaction and dialogue. And usually that happens by establishing some ground rules in your forums up front. I typically suggest like a rubric style grading policy if faculty are going to use the rubrics a lot, because that kind of takes the guesswork out of things and doesn't have the students just write thanks or yes as a response to things. But you want to make sure that it is a safe environment for them to type and know that they're not going to get ridiculed for it. And interaction and dialogue, you want to make sure that you keep the conversation going.
And I don't know if I can interject here just for a moment, but here at Point University, we have what we call a netiquette, and it's a standard operating kind of rules and procedures for online discussion that just basically just gets copied and pasted into every instructor's syllabus. So. That's
perfect. I don't think we have something like that here yet. It's something that I might have to take back to some of our deans. Because I know that we do it right now. It's teacher by teacher, it's faculty member by faculty member, how they choose to run the class. So yeah, that would be very helpful with students in these online courses. Oops, I've skipped one. So the other thing to think about is allowing your students to get to know you and get to know each other and have a social outlet for them. I usually suggest to faculty that they have some type of forum where the students can just chit chat if they want, like a class cafe or whatever they want to call it. That students can get in there and talk about what they did that weekend if they really want to. I always suggest allowing the students to get to know the faculty member too. So have an introduction forum or an introduction video that tells a little bit about the faculty member themselves, what they're interested in, and be active within the course. So in the online course that I teach, they typically will at least see me or hear my voice every lesson that's up. And I'll pop into forums and write back to them or various things. As you go, and what I say to faculty is, as the first time that you teach an online course, it takes a lot of time, and you're kind of working with things that could be tricky. When you move from teaching in a face-to-face environment to an online environment, it takes some time to really nail down how that course really should look. But as you are able to introduce the concepts, connect the concepts, clarify and summarize, I usually, when I post a lesson one time, I may get students who have a bunch of questions, and a lot of times instead of responding to just one student, I'll just create a short 5-minute clarification video and send it out to all the students. That way, because you might have 5 others that have the same question who didn't want to email you and ask. Be able to make those connections for the students, kind of help them, guide them, summarize for them the content. All right. I think I have sorry if I flew through that fast. I wanted to make sure that I left some time for questions. If anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I think we have one here from Paul who messaged me to ask if you would recommend using any kind of teleconference to avoid or reduce, he says, isolation when using Sakai in an online class.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest using something that's synchronous. What I found was that it depended on which group of students I had, how interested in a synchronous session they were. I've had some groups of students who all want to be in a synchronous session, so I'll run one every week for them. And then I have some students who chose an online class because they didn't want to do anything synchronous. And so at that point, I'll just do like synchronous office hours instead. But there are definitely softwares that you can use out there. WebEx is one of them. We also, like I said before, we use Panopto, which Panopto can podcast as well. So they could join that session too, live. Seeing things.
All right. Nicola asks, how do you teach lectures facilitation skills, like in terms of online facilitation?
Sure. For me personally, I teach a technology course here at Marist, and what I typically tend to do is set up the class in such a way that it becomes routine. So they'll see a setup from me that is the same every week. So they'll see an introduction video of typically me talking about what we're going to do that week. They'll see, I use the Sakai checklists to keep them on track. I use Panopto to do lectures, and I tend to keep lectures. They might see 3 of them in a week, but I typically keep them at like 10 minutes if I'm going to be video lecturing. And then they'll see some readings and some assignments. So they see that every week, all the way through the semester. And in the forums, what I'll do is I typically tend to ask them a question to get them thinking about the content, and it's usually toward the beginning of the week when they're just starting out with the content. I ask them to also respond to 2 other classmates, and then they'll get me responding in between, and kind of, I typically try to push them toward thinking outside the box when it comes to technology. And what I also do with the tests and quizzes, at the end of each week, they have to give me a reflection. They have to go find an article that is somewhat recent that relates to what we've talked about that week, and then they have to tell me how that article relates to what we've talked about that week, and then I'll respond kind of in blog style to their reflections. So that's basically how I set up my course online. I try to move away from the traditional multiple choice assessments and move more toward like the project-based type assessments in an online course, because that way I have a better idea of how they're actually doing the work. You can't always be 100% sure that they're the ones doing the work, but it's a little bit easier in that sense.
I also know, in terms of like kind of helping facilitators and lecturers prepare kind of on the front end, some universities will have kind of a pretty standard format for how to build an online course, and that'll help lecturers or instructors kind of gauge where they're going. And then I know a lot of like instructional support departments will load up a bunch of tutorial videos to try to help out in using the technology and making the most out of it. And so if Nicola, if your university has something like that, that would be probably very useful to look into to see if they have a kind of a database of instructional tutorial videos, and if there is some kind of standardized format for building online courses.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. We, at Marist, we don't have a standard format for the online courses, but our deans recommend that the faculty members come through a training on Sakai, and they all have to, in order to get their money, they have to pass Quality Matters certification. So not sure how many people in here use Quality Matters, and that's a whole other can of worms, and I can talk to you about how that relates to the community of inquiry too. But the Quality Matters is a quality framework for online courses. And so a lot of times our faculty will get half of their development funds up front, and then they'll get the second half of their money after they pass a quality review of their online course.
Are there other questions for Dr. Sharp?
Here's my contact information if anybody would like to contact me or talk to me outside of this. That's my Marist email. And then on Twitter, our department Twitter account is Marist Digital Ed. My personal Twitter account is the second one.
Well, if we weren't all muted, I'm sure that they would give you a hand.
Well, thanks.
But thank you very much, Dr. Sharp, for that. And these materials, of course, are available through the Sakai website. And then this session will be available probably within about 1 or 2 weeks, where you could watch it again if you wanted to. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharp.
Thanks.
Hopefully we'll see more of you or different ones of us in the next session.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. is. It's ended. Because I got disconnected, I had controls before that I lost when I got connected. So that's on me. It's not your fault.